Boker Tov, Santa Fe. Erev Tov, Sachnin. Brachim, Habayim. Welcome to everybody in between. It's after Thanksgiving Day weekend, and if you're like me, you've been stuck in or near the house, walking distance, haven't really been able to sort of even think about going very far. But today on Sunday, as always, once a month with our favorite tour guide, Reuven Solomon, we're taking you down south. We are taking you on a virtual tour. So dust off the sandalim, find some good walking shoes, and we're going to walk around some really exciting terrain in Israel. For those of you that have made this journey before, we'd love to hear about your favorite spot or a fond memory you have of traveling down to the Negev region. A lot doesn't count for this trip. We'll save that for a separate episode. But you know, this is a large landmass in Israel with great historic, archaeological, and frankly, nationalistic significance. So there's quite a bit we're going to cover from Reuven. I've had the ability to preview the slides, so I know some of the stuff he's going to show today, and really it's going to be a lot of fun. So I see that people are calling in from all over, from Villanova, Pennsylvania, from South Florida, and with that, we know that people really come to expect for at least an hour over the weekend. We try to take you away to another place. So thanks everybody for coming from Peabody, Massachusetts, from Long Island, New York, from Golden Goshen, Indiana. Not everything's coming out this morning. Holmes, New York, Boston, Massachusetts, Omaha, Nebraska, and Brooklyn, New York, Manchester, England. We have a global crowd today. Turning over now to you, Reuven, and tell us where you're taking us.
Shalom, Wayne, and shalom to all our friends at the AIFL. It's wonderful to be with you once again, and I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and looking forward to the next big family celebration in Christmas. Today, we're going down south. We're heading down a highway called the number 40, a very major highway that takes us all the way through to the southernmost port city, Eilat. And on the way on this road, we're not going as far as Eilat. We're going to have 3 stops. We're going to be stopping first and foremost at Tel Sheva, also known as Be'er Sheva, the city of our patriarchs, we call it. We'll continue from there to the desert kibbutz home of our first Prime Minister, David Ben Gurion. And we'll tell you the story of how it becomes his kibbutz home. And our last stop will be at a geological phenomena, Machtesh Ramon, which is really a primeval site where we will see strata from 200 million years ago. So we've got a big day ahead of us, and we can begin with the city of our patriarchs, Tel Be'er Sheva. What you're looking at on that slide is a well outside a gate. The well predates the gate into the city by quite a ways. And by tradition, that well is the well dug by Abraham, who our patriarch, who meets Avimelech at that site. And the events actually, according to Genesis, give the name to the city up to this day, Be'er Sheva, the city of our patriarchs, we call it. You know, Be'er Sheva was a boundary of early Israel, and in the Bible, there are 9 mentions of a quote from Dan to Be'er Sheva. Dan was the furthest point north in the early Israelite period, and Be'er Sheva was the furthest point south. And thus, the borders of Israel, north and south, were described as from Dan to Be'er Sheva. 8 times it's actually Dan to Be'er Sheva, and 1 time it's described as Be'er Sheva to Dan. So that's why we say 9 times. Be'er Sheva becomes, in the Israelite period, of course, part of the kingdom of Judah, and becomes, in the time of the early kings of the province of Judah, as opposed to Israel in the north, it becomes an administrative center. And as an administrative center, is fortified as a fortified city. We're going to see where it is on the map now. And you will notice that it is on the very edge of the desert, where only 200 millimeters of rain fall a year. In the biblical times, they might have had a little bit more rain, because we talk about agriculture there. But these days, Be'er Sheva is in the middle of the country, between the Mediterranean and the border and the Dead Sea, Israel's present border with Jordan, and right bang in the snap in the middle of the country, with everything south of Be'er Sheva being desert. We get a close-up look now of what gives Be'er Sheva its name, at the well that traditionally is built by Abraham our patriarch, a 13-meter, very deep well to groundwater. And I would like to read for you, if you'll permit me, from Genesis 21, a couple of lines. And Avimelech said to Abraham, "What mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves?" And he said, "For these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, and that they may be a witness to me, that I have dug this well." Therefore he called the place Be'er Sheva, because there they swore, both of them. Thus they made a covenant at Be'er Sheva. Then Avimelech rose up, and Pico, the captain of the host, and returned to the land of the Philistine. And Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Be'er Sheva. And thus we are told that that's how Be'er Sheva gets its name. Be'er in Hebrew is a well. And Sheva, the root word, has a double meaning. It can be a vow, a covenant, like the one that Abraham and Avimelech made, or it can be the number 7, Sheva, the way we pronounce Be'er Sheva today, although it's the same root word, the vow and the 7. And why 7? The 7 ewe lambs that were slaughtered to consecrate the covenant, or the vow by the well, and thus Be'er Sheva. Curiously, and we won't read it all, but curiously, 5 chapters later, the same basic storyline goes this time with Avimelech and Isaac, and once again a pact, and once again the name Be'er Sheva, and once again the reference to the vow and the contract made by a well. So it was an event that apparently was significant enough to be recorded by perhaps different authors, mixing in between Isaac, his son, and Abraham, our patriarch. But that's how Be'er Sheva gets its name. Incidentally, Isaac's passage also gives us a third possible meaning to the name Be'er Sheva, because there he counts 7 wells. We're going to take a walk now into the city gates that you see just behind the well. And city gates, I want to tell you, were the most important part of an ancient city, because there everyone coming in and out of the city Very handy to have a well right by the entrance of the city. But everyone coming in and out of the city would have to pass through not one set of gates that we just passed through, the first set of gates, but another set of gates at the end of a walk through before passing the guards' chambers. And since everyone, absolutely everyone, had to come in and out of the city through this area, this is where the Bible tells us several times where the important events take place, like the kings who sat in the gates, between the gates of the city, the judges. Of course, if you're a money changer, that's the place to be. Everyone's coming in and out. If you're a beggar, no better place to be. If you're a politician kissing the babies, that would be the best place to be. And of course, the prophets and the soothsayers would meet everyone coming in and out of the city gates. So here you can see a view above from the entrance, the first gate. And after these chambers, where perhaps, at least in one of them, the judges would sit, before going through the second gate, you would have to pass through the guards, of course, and then you would be in what was the courtyard of the city. So the city gates, between the gates, were a really important function of any city. Here you see one of the chambers with the plastered benches where perhaps the judges sat. And in judgment, the courthouse. So this was city square, the courts, the meeting place, and everything that was important between the gates of the city. So now, once we're in the city, we'll see another one of the chambers. Here you see again seats around, plastered. And here you'll see the sign talking about the governor's palace. We're talking about a structure with the basic foundations found in place, not all the way up to where you see them, but the basic foundations found in place of the governor's palace. Why governor's palace? During the Israelite period, Be'er Sheva served as an administrative center, and thus a governor would be situated in Be'er Sheva, and he had the largest dwelling, a nice palace close to the entrance. The other folk, and I want to emphasize that this is a fortified city. It's an administrative center, and it's not a city where thousands or hundreds even of people lived. But estimates are there between 300 to 400, I'm talking about 10th century BCE, 300 to 400 people, possibly military leaders and administrators and so on, living within this fortified city. And they lived in typically Israelite 9th, 10th century BCE dwellings that you will see in the next slide, called four-roomed houses. There are a few dozen of these remaining in the archaeological excavation at Tel Sheva. And at the signpost here, it's not very clear, but you can see a sort of an artist's concept of the four rooms that would make up these houses from 3,000 years ago. Stone houses from 3,000 years ago. So as I said, there are a few dozen of these, and some 300 people who actually, in the early part of the Israelite period, lived in Be'er Sheva, in this fortified 4-meter wide walls that surrounded the city. One of the finds that were very spectacular in Tel Sheva were remains in one of these fortified walls within the city, predating the construction, obviously, of the walls, were elements that were taken apart from a four-horned altar that you're going to see shortly. On the next slide, a four-horned altar. What you're looking at here, I have to emphasize, is a replica. It's a replica of an altar that whose parts, original parts today, stand reassembled in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. So this is a replica, and these parts, these stones, were found in secondary use in a refortification of the walls from the time of Hezekiah. And boy, does that tell us a story. If you look into Kings 2, Kings 2, and I just want to get you the correct reference. Chapter 23 in Kings 2 gives you a very full accounting of the religious reforms carried out by the king in Jerusalem, Hezekiah, who, before he starts preparing for the Assyrian onslaught that is soon to follow, creates or causes a religious reform centralizing worship at the temple in Jerusalem. Prior to that, you know, he instructs, destroy your idols. And you know, whenever you see a non-smoking sign anywhere, you know someone is smoking or someone's thinking about smoking. So if he's saying, destroy your idols, it means the good Jews of his day were playing it safe and keeping some of the idols still under their beds. And he tells them to destroy their idols, and then he instructs that all these altars throughout the land, he was in charge of Judah, of course, Judea, whereas in Dan, that was part of the northern kingdom, but we have a similar altar in Dan, or had a similar altar in Dan, even larger. Another one in Arad, and in several other places. They were actually having altars that in this religious reform of Hezekiah is banned, and thus the altar in Be'er Sheva is taken apart and the stones reused to fortify the walls. And it tells us the story that you will read in Kings, second book of Kings 23. But one of the highlights of a visit to Tel Sheva is the walk through. I see that sometimes I'm speaking a little too softly. I'll try to speak up. But one of the highlights of Be'er Sheva, a visit to Be'er Sheva, is a walk through the waterworks that were actually in place already in the 10th century BCE. An earthquake caused some damage in the 8th century BCE and had to be repaired a little bit. And then it works all the way through to the Hellenistic period, right up to the Hasmonean period, as a waterworks, amazing, with channel that brought the stream of Hebron into a shaft dug, the shaft you see in front of you now, some 20 meters deep, with stairs, ancient stairs, clinging to the sides of it, going right down to the bottom of the shaft to the reservoir, where water would gather in reservoirs like this one, room after room. And we're going to take a walk through this reservoir while I tell you that some 700 cubic meters of water were stored up until the earthquake towards the end, in the time of the Hellenistic period before the Hasmoneans, an earthquake that causes the channels to be blocked. And since then, it's only the local rain that refills, and that we have to pump out the water sometimes. But it is quite an amazing structure when you consider that it is 3,000 years old. So Wayne, I don't know if there are questions already, but this would be a good time if there are while we're...
There's a question about, there's a lot of chat and interest, obviously, in the archaeological digs. I think a lot of people, it's sort of mixed between people who know the city of Beersheba and those who know the archaeological site of Beersheba. What has been the current state of archaeological dig activities? We have actually someone here, Claire, wrote that she met her best friend on a dig in Tel Sheva. So there are people that have a real passion for the archaeology. Haven't heard a lot about that during the COVID period. Do you have any sense whether digs have been able to continue since they're outdoors?
Now it's not the season to be digging, of course, with the lot of rain that we've been having. But through COVID, we have had continuing on a smaller scale excavation. You know, one of the beauties of living in Israel and being a tour guide in Israel is that these sites are forever developing and being developed. And that is because there are constantly additional excavations trying to find out a little more about the site each time. And Be'er Sheva is no exception. There have been continuing excavations. The latest major find, of course, was the clearing out of this waterworks in Be'er Sheva. That was quite a while ago. Although I need to mention that not at the site, but in the town itself, they've actually created a visitor center of the story of Abraham and the well, and with a replica, of course, and so on in a courtyard, telling the story of Be'er Sheva, the Tel Be'er Sheva. But the Tel is the actual authentic site.
How deep are we going here, Reuven? This from the video, this looks really quite way down there.
We're going pretty deep. The shaft goes down more than the shaft itself, the wall shaft, more than 20 meters, and then we're going down even a little further. But you'll find that the way out is much easier and much faster. When we eventually make our way up the stairs, we're not going out the way we came in. They've designed it so we go past, as we go out, a blocked channel, one of the channels that brought the stream waters of the Hebron stream into this reservoir. But today we're going to use that more or less as an exit to take us out of the site at the very entrance, or very close to the entrance that we came into. But you'll have to watch your heads, because some part of it is quite low. You know, we even have to, in the rainy season, have pumps pumping out the water to allow visitors to continue to visit. Not because the channels are once again working, but because of rainwater that gathers in this low part. The walls, as you can see, of course, are plastered. Otherwise, they would not hold the water. And once we make our
Reuven, we have a question about those original 300 people who were living in the settlement. Do you have any sense of what the size of a family unit is? Like how many families there were, or was, you know, we tend to think of this as you know, a single family or multiple families? Was it the beginning of a city?
With 4 ruined houses, I would guess that these were quite populated with the 300 people that we have, and some people have counted. Actually, we haven't discovered all of the foundations of these 4 ruined houses, but some people count into the close to 100 of these such structures. Which would mean, if you say, let's say 80, you're talking about 3.5 people, perhaps in each house. Some houses with just a couple, some with singles, because these were administrators, of course, and officials more than the common folk.
Claire is asking when the excavation started. She said that she was there in 1970 doing some early digging. All right.
Yes, that was pretty early digging, but there was excavation even beforehand. In fact, one of the first things that they uncovered were the wells. And the important well, of course, the one at the entrance to the city that immediately is traditionally associated with the one that Abraham dug. Here we are, almost on the way out into the sunlight. And with this, we shall end our visit to Tel Be'er Sheva and continue along the 40 to Kibbutz Sde Boker. Sde Boker. Along the route of the 40 is where a group of pioneers in 1952 establish a settlement. They're there a little earlier, young pioneers, following David Ben Gurion's dream and inspiration. He was a real visionary of greening the desert. And when they were there, let me tell you, in 1952, it didn't look like this. It was desert. It was dry and sand and rock and desert. David Ben Gurion used to holiday from his, very rarely, but from his house in Tel Aviv. Some of you may have actually visited his house in Tel Aviv. Really worth a visit. From his house in Tel Aviv, he would, when he had the rare vacations, be driven to Eilat, where he liked to have some relaxation. And on one of these drives, in the later 50s, actually probably very close to when the kibbutz was established, he notices, the story goes, a group of pioneers building quite close to the road. And the road is still very close to the kibbutz. You pass the kibbutz on this road. It wasn't the highway that it is now, but he stops his driver, and according to the story, goes over to these youngsters and says, "What are you doing here?" And they tell him that they're going to establish a ranch. That's what Boker means, a rancher. And Sde Boker means the field of the ranchers. So the field of the rancher. And then they're intending to follow his dream. They recognize him, of course, immediately with the tufts of hair poking out from above his ears. And he says to them, "I envy you. I envy you. I wish I could do the same as you're doing. It's my dream. And when I retire, I'd like to join you." Of course, they took this very, very lightly. But guess what? In 1953, when he first retires, not totally, he retired a couple of times and they called him back a couple of times because he was indispensable. But when first time in 53, when he retires, he applies to join the kibbutz. And kibbutz is kibbutz. They have to have a vote to accept this member as a candidate or not. Well, kibbutz records show that it was unanimous, but there was apparently one abstention to accept the prime minister, which is going to change the kibbutz, of course. It's going to change the whole thing because as you will see as when we see his home up closer, this is the hut that he is given on the kibbutz. I would say 3 or 4 times larger than the normal kibbutz hut, and you will see this in the following slides, because after all, number one, there are going to be lots of VIP visitors in his retirement on the kibbutz, even though he's got a very a menial job that he wanted, looking after the lambs, David the shepherd. He's going to have a string of visitors coming, and there has to be some sort of accommodation that will be fitting for the first prime minister of Israel. But in addition to that, he had thousands of books, and he read them, and they needed a place to be on a shelf somewhere. He couldn't bring everything that he had in Tel Aviv to his kibbutz hut. And those of you who visited Tel Aviv know how many books there are still there in the libraries in Tel Aviv. that I will talk about a particular book from there, but he needed books here in his hut as well, and we can see in the following slides the type of hut that he had, larger than the normal kibbutznik. Here, a map showing you where Sde Boker is. We can go past that, but this is where he drives past and decides that he's going to be a member of the kibbutz. Here are the rooms, the libraries that he had in Sde Boker, and literally thousands of books. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a book story that is related to us from an ex-president of Israel, Yitzhak Navon, who was recruited by Ben Gurion while he was prime minister much earlier to teach him Spanish. His official title was political secretary, but his real job at first was to teach David Ben Gurion Spanish. Why? Because David Ben Gurion wanted to read Don Quixote in its origin. He didn't want translations, and thus he learned the language to read a book. He was amazing. He read and spoke quite a few languages. So he added Spanish to the list. The home in Sde Boker is very visitable, alongside with a very extensive hands-on for kids display in another hut of the period of time and David Ben Gurion, and very much recommended for a visit. In the following slides, you'll see his bedtime reading. They had 2 bedrooms. That's why they needed a larger place. Why? Because David Ben Gurion made do with less than 2 hours of sleep a night. He read volumes, and he must have been a speed reader, because he also retained a lot of what he read, or most of what he read, and he knew his books. So you see there his bedtime reading by his bed in his bedroom, and his wife Paula had an adjacent bedroom where she could sleep instead of reading books until 4 o'clock in the morning. The house is very modest. This is a little kitchenette, very much like the early kibbutz members' kitchenettes. And we're going to talk about this incredible visionary who chose to be buried by his kibbutz, the kibbutz he lived at. He joined the kibbutz in '53. He actually lives on the kibbutz until his death in November of 1973, after the Yom Kippur War. Here we're going to take a walk to his gravesite by the incredibly beautiful Zin Valley that is in the backyard of Sde Boker. Today, of course, green with a national park, with the ibex. It is very rare to come to visit his tomb right beside the kibbutz and not see herds of ibex. It's a national park, and they're protected species, and they come through by the dozens or hundreds at sunrise. If you're there and you walk to the edge of the Zin Valley that you're overlooking now, the very beautiful Zin Valley, it's a sight that is absolutely, absolutely amazing. Beauty.
Reuven, there are a couple of questions about the kind of treatment Ben Gurion got, from the kibbutz once he was living there. And I know you said there were sort of like 2 periods where he initially retired and then was really had other duties that he had to go back to Tel Aviv. But when he did retire, did he sort of stay put there and just enjoy the scenery and his books and learning how to speak Spanish so he could read more books in Spanish?
Absolutely. By that time, he already knew Spanish, and he had already read Don Quixote early on. But his gravesite, as you can see here beside Paula, his wife, is overlooking this beautiful scenery that you just saw. And, you know, this man was an extraordinary visionary. He looked into the future, and really, you know, Israel wasn't built by one person, but without a Ben Gurion, there wouldn't have been an Israel. You can say that about a few other people as well. Without Herzl, there wouldn't be an Israel. But Ben Gurion was such a visionary.
For those that were listening to our webinar last week about Weizmann, we heard the case being made that without Weizmann, there wouldn't be an Israel.
Correct. There's another, he could be added to the list, absolutely. So it wasn't a one-man show, but certainly without a Ben Gurion, forget it. It wouldn't have happened. You know, Ben Gurion was on the kibbutz, retired during the Six-Day War, and was kept abreast all the way through. All the way through, he knew all, he was being briefed about everything that was happening. And let me tell you, after the incredible, miraculous victory in 6 days, David Ben Gurion said some prophetic and amazing things that we did not listen to. One of the things he said is, unite Jerusalem, never to be divided again. Annex the Golan Heights. The Syrians should know that there's a price for losing a war they start. But out of everywhere else, get out and get out fast. Don't wait for talks. Boy, oh boy, had we taken that advice, how much heartache and struggle and problems that we would not have had on our hands.
Reuven, there's a question about how come the graves are raised.
Great question. Great question.
The usual practice.
Great question. It's you'll see this on the Mount of Olives as well, and in other places where Jews follow the tradition. The more, I would say, observant Jews follow the tradition of not having standing headstones. The body is actually buried in the ground. The body is not buried above ground. The body is buried in the ground, but in order to create some sort of a monument without having a standing headstone, the area above the body is a raised sort of platform. This, as I said, you will see in many places, like in the Mount of Olives or in Mount Herzl, where it's not usual to have standing headstones. And if they are standing headstones, they're low.
So there's another question, and we're getting some audio variants again today. So if you can try to project into the microphone a little bit more.
Sure.
The question is, you know, how come there's a segregation of Ben Gurion's books? Why didn't they just go into the kibbutz library as one would normally expect on a kibbutz?
You saw his bedtime reading?
So it's a practical matter, in other words.
Yeah, he needed it close to him.
Fair enough.
Close to him.
Well, I can't imagine too many former presidents, prime ministers, or kings or otherwise, heads of country, heads of state, that sort of turn over everything while they're still alive to the property of others. And I guess it was a small price, not exactly a presidential palace.
Exactly. You know, there's another very quick story that, did I tell you about the book that he forgot one time when he went to Eilat and wanted to read that book? He left without it and stopped in Be'er Sheva. In those days, phones were a rarity. This is before he was on the kibbutz. Phones were a rarity. And he stops in Be'er Sheva and calls Yitzhak Navon, his political secretary, and says, Isaac, I forgot a book that I wanted to take with me. Can you send it to me when it's possible? go into the second room. I'm talking about his home in Tel Aviv now. The second room of the library, fourth shelf up, in the middle of the shelves, you will find I forget the name of the book, but he described the cover, the pink cover of the book. Please, and he gave him the name, of course, please send it to me. And Itzhak Navon tells the story of following the instructions exactly, almost blindfolded, reaching out his hand, and there was the book. And this just shows that David Ben-Gurion not only read the books, he knew them. He knew where they were. And he described exactly where the book that he wanted to read was. An amazing visionary. Well, we should continue to our next site after having a few more slides of the scenery around. We will approach on the same road, Machtesh Ramon. As I said, very rare not to see the ibex all around. Beautiful scenery. And now you're looking at the map that shows you how they're connected to Mitzpe Ramon, where we've just arrived, Sde Boker to the north of it, and Be'er Sheva north of Sde Boker on the same road. Machtesh Ramon, an elongated heart-shaped erosion cirque, you would call it, but a very unusual phenomena, because erosion cirques are usually created by glaciers that melt and take away some of the foundation and the earth of them, revealing a crater-like, but a crater is actually caused by impact, usually meteorites. But Machtesh Ramon was not created by impact. It was and it wasn't created by a glacier melting. It was created by water, flood waters, sweeping through and sweeping out the softer earth after the top of mountain range erodes and allows the water to come in to create a 40-kilometer long and 2-kilometer at its short part to 10-kilometer wide dugout or washout of the inside of a mountain range. Now, I'm going to try and describe to you how this sort of a geological phenomena, we have 3 such craters in Israel. The little crater, the great crater, all 3 in the Negev, and of course, Machtesh Ramon, the most impressive and beautiful of these Machteshim, that the word itself has been adopted into English, incidentally, to properly describe this phenomena. Not crater, not erosion cirque, that is the closest thing to it, but Machtesh. And if you want to try and imagine how this sort of a phenomena is created, let's have a look at the next couple of slides. Take a note of the strata, please, and you'll see that under the top strata of hard rock is softer and sandier rock, and we'll go to the other side of the crater now in the next slide, and you will see on the other side similar strata, but heading upwards more steeply. And this creates, if I can describe for you as we go through the next video, how you can imagine this type of geological phenomena is created. When I'm trying to describe it, imagine yourself on the seashore building a long, steep mountain out of the sand, packing the outside of this mountain so it won't just fall away with water to harden the outside of it. Then draw your finger across the top of this mountain and start pouring buckets of water down on this mountain. What's going to happen? Some of the top will erode and fall in, and the water will sweep out the inside of this mountain range because it's softer sand. The outside crust is harder, and if it's cracked, then the water will make it even more cracked. And sweeping out for 40 kilometers, this mountain range, you get the view of the inside of a mountain range. Here in this video, you're looking at the roadway that zigzags down and across the 10 kilometers of Machtesh Ramon. The town of Mitzpe Ramon is on one of its banks. And of course, the visitor center right here in front of the town, right close to the road, where you're already going to see the relatively new visitor center with its theater that is jutting out. And we're going to have a look inside this theater in just a few moments. Now, in the next couple of slides, you're going to see the entrance to the visitor center, Machtesh Ramon, and because of having a similar name, that's the only connection. It also, as part of its display, commemorates, remembers, honors the astronauts, Ilan Ramon, the very first Israeli astronaut, on the disastrous space shuttle Columbia's re-entry into to Earth, disintegrates, and this event is remembered, and recorded in the beginning part of the visitor center, which is really the very beginning of your walk through. The main part, of course, is the Machtesh Ramon, but here we honor the Ilan Ramon, Israel's first astronaut, and the other 6 astronauts who lost their lives in this terrible disaster. In the next slide, you see the outside of the theater, where the final presentation in a very moving movie presentation of this memorial to the Columbia Space Shuttle takes place. And when the show is over, I'm going to take you inside the visitor center now. The curtains that cause the screen move apart, and wow, you have the Machtesh Ramon in the palm of your hand, spread around with its beautiful colors. The rest of the display, the main part of the walk through the visitor center, of course, is concentrated on the Machtesh itself and its different aspects, and you'll see that in the following slides of how interactive displays for the youngsters especially, but not only, give a sense of this geological phenomena. In the next slide, you might see some more of the hands-on display that allows one to understand how, first and foremost, seabed is pushed up into a mountain range, and then how this mountain range erodes at the top and is swept out by floodwaters, creating this primeval scene, exposing strata from 2 million, did I say 2,000? 2 million years ago. We're going to have a few slides of the scenery now around Mitzpe Ramon. And if we have time, I'd like to end with a little bit of at least part of a video. But the colors are absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing colors. This is, you may have in the past received souvenirs from Israel, these little bottles with colored sand and a camel or the words Israel or whatever, or the Magen David in the bottle made of this colored sand. Well, this is where the sand comes from Mitzpe Ramon. We're going to flip through these slides to show you a little bit of the scenery before we get to the video.
Reuven, while you're waiting on that, there was a question that sort of connects your first stop to your last stop. Is there any evidence that the Israelites knew about the Ramon crater, or only speculation?
I think it's only speculation, because remember the borders of Israel. From Dan to Be'er Sheva, they were right at the border. And Ramon is south of the border, as the famous song goes. Here you see some ancient strata of millions of years ago. And here, this site we call the Carpenter's shop, because of the similarity to logs that these quartzite polygonal prisms are made because of the intense pressure of tectonic movement and of the heat that causes the rock to split in columns like this, and then bits and pieces of the column looking like the back of a carpenter's shop, looking like logs, but it's quartzite. And you'll see in the next couple of slides some more scenery from these are the stumps of these quartzite rocks that were once one piece solid, but with the heat and the pressure caused to create quartzite columns of all sorts of polygons of shape. Now, in the next couple of slides, you're going to get another couple of views of Mitzpe Ramon. These fossils, ammonites, from the snail family, if you like, single cell, like the octopus, were found in abundance in Mitzpe Ramon, because they're, as I said, seabed that was pushed up in a mountain range. And the original fossils, the largest ones we found were the size of tractor tires. Enormous. These ones are less large, but you can see by the hand beside them, still not small, of the wall of fossils of these ammonites that are exposed with the sweeping out of the inside of a mountain range, revealing strata from an ancient seabed that was pushed up and then now exposed to us because of the creation of this machtesh. I don't know how much time we have left to show you maybe some of the video.
Sure, go ahead.
But this will be also, as you're looking at the video, and I'll interrupt when I need to, but if this will also be an opportunity to answer, to answer some of the outstanding questions.
Reuven, someone's asking, given the size of the crater, where the sand went, like where was it sort of cast off to? Well,
that's a lot of sand in Israel you'll find, and as you drive out of Ramon crater, you'll see it. Swept away in plains of sand, in between, of course, the mountains that still dot some of the area. You'll see, in fact, in the middle sometimes of the crater, where there were harder strata, harder levels of rock, where they resist the sweeping away, and they look like the remnants of little layers of cake. Here you're looking at a largely rebuilt Khan, an inn from the days of the Nabateans, because the Nabateans would come through, and there was actual water here, and you'll see in a minute. This is a Nabatean stop. We're talking here about maybe 4,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago, when the Nabateans plied their trade routes across the desert, and they had the secrets of water. As we're going to see today, we have the secrets because we can get to them by jeep. And this area called Sarona has natural water springs and green, and is hikeable. You need a jeep to get there, otherwise it's a very long walk. But you can hike through this beautiful scenery, as I said, primeval scenery. Here you see the different colors of sands in what was left behind by quarries in the early part of Israel. We quarried here, and they were stopped soon enough, I hope. You can see the water pools that have been colored by the different minerals that are in the strata, the different colors of sand, where you can make your bottles from.
Reuven, there's a question about, you mentioned the quarries, and that are there any environmental threats to the crater now, or is it largely protected?
It's a protected national park, and it's strictly enforced. Here we are. You may have noticed we were just at the Carpenter shop, walking along the trail here in what we call the Carpenter shop. You will see what you saw in the stills of these polygon prisms created by the heat and the force. And here's some fresh water coming out of streams and filling up these pools. And with, I'm sorry again. And with that, I think
so one question about the naming of the crater itself. Do you know why? There's a Facebook question about why it was named Ramon.
It was actually, I think, taken from a biblical reference. I'm not sure. I'll have to look it up. But if I remember rightly, it has a connection to a biblical reference. And thus also the surname Ramon of our first astronaut comes from probably the same source, but I'll look it up and I'll answer that question later.
And Francine is asking about flash floods in the area, which is that something that actually happens within the crater or just in the region around it?
It can happen. It can happen. No very serious floods, but let me tell you, the temperature drop in the Machtesh is phenomenal. I mean, on a hot day and at night, the temperature can just drop to almost freezing, and of course below freezing in the winter. Let me tell you that Mitzpe Ramon and the Ramon Machtesh is also an ideal place for stargazing. Mm-hmm. And in fact, a couple of companies actually take you out there with telescopes to stargaze, because let me tell you, there's no interfering light around, and it's an absolutely amazing sky. Looking up, not only what you're standing on is beautiful geography, but the sky itself also is phenomenal. So as soon as you can, come and see it in person.
Well, that's as much as an invitation I think that anyone needs. You know, we're in the United States, we're finishing up our Thanksgiving weekend. We're reflecting on the things that we are thankful for, and certainly anyone that's ever had the privilege to spend time in Israel's southern region knows that it's a godsend. It is a place to visit in the day. It's a place to visit at night and see the stars. And it really is a remarkable reminder of the clock of humanity and how it ticks on sort of a different clock than the one we wear, you know, on our wrist. And I do want to acknowledge that this connection between outer space and the space that you see in the crater that is made so powerfully when you visit the visitor center is actually a great pivot point to our next webinar series this coming Wednesday. The America-Israel Friendship League's continuing our webinar series by looking at the collaboration between NASA and the Israel Space Agency. And one of the themes, you know, that continues throughout the story of Israel is how something emerges from even disaster. And looking at the photos of Ramon, you know, it's almost a expected that even with a tragedy as great as that, both on the personal level and the national level, that not only did the Israel Space Agency not close its doors, but it actually continued to grow and expand to become the fourth nation on the planet to be able to reach the lunar orbit. And that will be the focus of this coming Wednesday's program that we're doing about the collaboration between the two programs, but also looking at the fruit of that collaboration with some of the both private and public space entrepreneurs that are doing projects that can only be done through space exploration that relate to education, that relate to scarce resources, that relate to science and technology and pharmaceutical collaboration. So really hope that everyone can come watch that legacy of Elon Ramon and the continuity of the Israel Space Agency. I know there are a lot of people on this webinar who are hearing Reuven come back for this monthly. We are blessed to have Reuven join us again in December for a year-end ceremony that will celebrate sites in Israel related to both Hanukkah and Christmas. So we hope that you'll come back for that on December 20th for a special holiday-themed tour that Reuven will lead and take us around to different spots in Israel. And one more program I just want to put on your radar screen for the very, very end of the year. You know, other people, they go away on their vacations and they sort of close up shop. At America-Israel Friendship League, we are here with you. We've been here with you through the entire pandemic. And on December 27th, Sunday, December 27th, we will be bringing you a year-end gift and present from all of us here with the Vertigo Dance Company, a world-renowned dance company that will be performing a piece called The Phoenix. And some of the performers will be in masks, some of the audience out in the streets of Jerusalem. You will see we'll be wearing masks. We'll have interviews from the choreographers and from the special dance team, and a special greeting from Mikhail Baryshnikov. The level and renown of Israeli modern dance is really something that everyone should be able to celebrate as part of their end of the year celebrations. Thanks for being with us. I'm Wayne Firestone. I love doing this. Have a great week. Shavua Tov. Thanks, Reuven. You bring us all to many wonderful places, and we're happy and thankful that all of us have been able to be here together. Everybody have a safe week. We enjoyed spending some time with you and having us all together in this virtual community.
Shalom, and have a great week.